Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30. Tonight, scenes from a web-based documentary series called Hometown Baghdad.
You know, premarital sex. American choppers make such a noise.
War, what a distraction. Also tonight, it's a bike ride, it's a protest, it's dodging the police. What is critical mass? But first, here are this week's online video picks. Video pick number 1. It's from the liberal website TalkingPointsMemo.com, where they've collected scenes from Rush Limbaugh's website to try and show that his idea of humor is not just conservative, but also racist. For example.
Here we go. This is Paul Shanklin as Al Sharpton about Barack Obama.
Barack, the magic Negro, lives in D.C. The L.A. Times, they call him that cause he's not authentic like me. Yeah, the guy from the L.A. paper said he make guilty whites feel good. They'll vote for him and not for me cause he's not from the hood. See, real black men like Snoop Dogg or me or Farrakhan have talked the talk and walked the walk, not coming late and won. Oh, Barack, the magic Negro, lives in D.C. The L.A. Times, they call him that cause he's black but not authentically. Barack, the magic Negro, lives in D.C. The L.A. Times, they call him that cause he's black but not authentically.
Now, the marketplace already removed Rush Limbaugh from doing NFL commentary on television because of his racial remarks. Remember that? So now that the pressure is on, will clips like this put any pressure on his radio show? We'll see. Video pick number 2. This one from Michelle Malkin's conservative blog at townhall.com. When Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid said America has already lost the war in Iraq, that reminded Malkin contributor Mary Catherine Ham of a book she read as a kid.
Do you like to hear good news? I do not like it, General Foos. I do not like to hear good news. Would you like it, sun or frost? I would not like it, sun or frost. I've told you that the war is lost. I do not like to hear good news. I do not like it, General Foos. Would you like it in a briefing? Would you listen without leaving? I do not like it in a briefing. I would not listen without leaving. I do not like it, sun or frost. I've told you that the war is lost. I do not like to hear good news. I do not like it, General Foos. Would you like it from Obama? Would you like it with a llama? Not from Obama, not with a llama, not in a briefing, not without leaving. I would not listen, sun or frost. I've told you that the war is lost.
Speaking of children's stories, here's video pick number 3. Heads up if you think Mayor Bloomberg is turning New York into a nanny state.
Based on a timeless classic, it's Mayor Poppins! Saul Chan of the New York Times calls it funnier than Rent.
I'm gonna bring my mother. She loves him.
I love Mary Poppins. Brooklyn, Queens, Boston, Staten Island, and Manhattan.
Saul Chan of the New York Times writes, the audience loved it, particularly those who had been drinking for 5 hours.
Mayor Poppins is my second favorite nanny.
I asked the guy playing Mayor Poppins to give me his autograph. He told me to use the one on my $400 rebate. It's crazy.
The New York Sun writes, this show could run forever, and the mayor should run too. But Saul Chan of the New York Times writes, this is the 3rd quote of mine in this commercial.
I love Mayor Poppins. You know, actually, I think I could play that part.
You really want to know what I think? It sucked.
Yes, come and see Mayor Poppins.
Don't coddle. Best foot forward. Spit spot.
Soon, starting a national tour. Or not. You never know.
That was from last month's annual comedy show featuring the mayor and members of the City Hall press corps. We found that version on the Daily News blog. Video pick number 4. Last Friday night was the latest critical mass bicycle ride in New York to protest our car and carbon culture and the restrictions on bicycles on the streets. Here are some scenes shot by riders themselves.
We're at Union Square Park. The critical mass just all went down the subway, and it's really fascinating because the police are here and they don't know what to do. They're all like, should we get coffee? Should we go to Starbucks? All the domestic spying. All the domestic spying cops. Albano's on the phone. He's like, where are they? Where are they? He's like, well, they're in the subway, and they can't talk because they're in between the subway. And everybody got out and helped them and swiped all the people who couldn't pay for it through. Who knows where the bike ride's going? It's going to pop up somewhere where the police aren't, hopefully, and they'll start riding their bikes. Yeah. Critical mass New York City.
Subway out there.
They use their bicycles, they use mass transit, and they don't pollute.
And video pick number 5. This grows out of an MTV project that arranged a satellite hookup between students at Kent State University in Ohio and some at Baghdad University. The producers were so taken with the young Iraqis that they launched a second project just focused on them, kind of a documentary video blog called Hometown Baghdad. Here's a recent entry.
I was going to meet my friends in college and to prepare for the exams, but I couldn't get out today, and I think the reason is, well, why don't you just hear for yourself?
So just better lay down and listen to the symphony of bullets.
That was a bullet. I think a sniper shot. Now we recognize the bullets. If it was AK bullets or a sniper, or we can say if it's an American bullet or an Iraqi bullet.
That was called Symphony of Bullets from Hometown Baghdad, and those are our online video picks for this week. We'll now look more closely at the issues raised in 2 of our videos. Later, we'll talk to one of the producers of Hometown Baghdad and see more clips of the Iraqis going to college in the middle of a war zone. But first, more on critical mass. They ride, they protest, they tangle with cops, mostly in court, thank goodness. But what is critical mass really? Let's find out and see more of their video. With me now are sisters Judy and Barbara Ross. Judy is a longtime volunteer at Time's Up, a grassroots environmental group, and she is also a critical mass participant. Barbara is the press coordinator for Time's Up and took part in the unusual critical mass ride last Friday night. Welcome to both of you. Thank you very much for coming in. So, Barbara, for the uninitiated who've heard the term but don't really know what it is, what is critical mass? Who wants it, actually?
Oh, okay.
I'll let Judy do.
Okay, I'll
Go
keep
ahead,
going.
Judy.
Critical mass is a celebration of bicycling and other non-polluting forms of transportation. We meet once a month, the last Friday of every month, at Union Square North, and we go for a bike ride. It doesn't have any leaders. There are no organizers. We if you want to figure out where we're going to go, you bike over to the front of the ride. If you want to follow, you can follow. If you don't want to follow, you can ride wherever you want. It's just a very spontaneous celebration and trying to encourage people to bicycle, especially in groups where it's safer. And it's not something that New York can take credit for, unfortunately. It started in 1992 in San Francisco, and it's in about 300 cities all around the world. So it's a great way, if you're traveling and you want to meet local communities, you can actually join their critical mass. We've been to critical mass in London, in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Milan, Italy, and it's just a wonderful, fun way to build community and also make people aware of the joy of bicycling and to promote non-polluting forms of transportation.
What a hoot that you've done it in all those cities. Have you been in a bunch of cities in different countries too?
Yes, we've been on the same rides in Milan and Los Angeles and all over the world.
How different is the scene from place to place?
Well, it's very different. In Milan, they have one person in the back, more of a city official, and he rides with us to make sure that nobody hurts the bicyclists, instead of the kind of the opposite here, where the police are.
The city official rides as an escort to protect the bicyclists in Milan?
Yes.
Just to make sure nobody bothers us. Yes, and they play Italian music. There's a guy selling beer and wine from a trailer along the way, and it was lots of fun.
That is pretty different from
very
here.
many people also, and it's every week there.
Every week?
Yes, every Thursday night, because they just love it so much.
How about that? And obviously the relationship with the police here is very different, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. Our phones are open, by the way. Critical mass riders can call in, and for those of you who've seen them on the streets or just seen them on television and wondered what is critical mass, you can call up and give us your reactions to them or ask your questions. 212-433-WNYC, 433-9692. Oh, I'm sorry, I gave the wrong phone number. It's 212-251-0801, 212-251-0801. Again, 212-251-0801. That's our phone number here tonight, not that other place. Tell us about your group, Time's Up, which is not critical mass per se. What is it, and what's the relationship between the two?
Well, Time's Up is a 20-year-old grassroots nonprofit direct action environmental group, and we promote group rides, group bicycle rides, but we also do community gardens, and we have, for about 10 years, promoted the critical mass ride. And we're not the organizers, we just promote the ride. And
yeah, we help spread the word. We have calendars that we make every month and tell people, or every 3 months or so, and tell people what rides are coming up. And so we wanted to make sure people knew about the critical mass that was happening the last Friday of every month at Union Square. So we included on our calendar of rides, but we don't know where it's going to land or where it's going to go, and we just show up there as same as everyone else. And
you also have a documentary called Some Assembly Required, is that right?
Yes, that documentary, Time's Up, has a video collective, and we did it with Glass Bead Collective, and that was another, that was included as well with our video.
That was shots of our March critical mass, and it shows a little bit about what it's like to be on the ride, the good, and sometimes not so, well, a little stressful.
So let's see a little bit of that. Critical mass riders think the police are unnecessarily rough with them in many cases. So here's an excerpt of that pro-critical mass documentary called Some Assembly Required. This scene is from the ride in March.
Getting arrested.
Police acting in. You gotta bring us somewhere else. I am all of you. All right? We're in the middle of the sidewalk.
So do either of you want to talk about that clip and the context of that clip? Who's familiar with it?
Well, I can talk about it. This takes place in Times Square during the March Critical Mass. And what happened was a group of riders went to Times Square to enjoy their bicycle. And the police, I don't want to answer why they do it, but they decide that they don't want people riding their bikes there. And they also didn't like people photographing either. And they were taking people off their bicycles, ticketing them. 3 people were arrested. Were there 3 people arrested that night?
Yes.
3 of them were arrested, and a couple of them were held overnight. Anything else you want to add?
Well, the interesting thing about that clip is that the first person is a photographer. He's not even a biker, and he was actually arrested and kept overnight. And then the second person was actually just pulling over. He wasn't going through a red light, or he wasn't doing anything. He's just pulling over, and then the police grabbed him and pushed him off his bike, and he was actually hurt from that. And that's and whoever ended up taking a picture of that incident, two of the cameraman and the photographer was actually arrested as well and kept overnight.
Now, I don't know what the police's version of that is,
Right.
but in general these days, critical mass and the police are in the news together because of this new permit policy that the NYPD has. The March Ride was the first one that was subject to that, where anybody who gathers in groups of 50 or more, whether it's people on 2 feet or people on 2 wheels, have to get a permit. Is that an unreasonable policy, in your opinion? Whoever wants it.
Well, there is something called the First Amendment, talking about people are free
Right to assemble
peacefully. And so there was a question, why do we need permission from the police? If you're a law-abiding cyclist or pedestrian, or motorist, why do you need permission from the police to use our public streets?
So you think the whole notion of parade permits in New York City is unconstitutional?
Well, I think the notion of the police defining what a parade is incorrect. I mean, when you think of a parade, you think of, you know, people in floats and batons on the street going slowly, you know, and it's not, that's not what this is. The parade is not necessarily 50 people together.
But if you're going to call a time and place for what might be 50 or more bicyclists to get together and then ride together on whatever route you choose, that's going to have an impact on traffic, right? That's going to have not just slow people down, but it might disrupt things in some way. So shouldn't the city have some organizational oversight on that, even if to help facilitate the ride in a safe way?
Right. Well, they do already have it. It's called the traffic rules. And if you're on a bicycle and you follow all the traffic rules, you don't go through the light, you have your bells and all the things that are needed, then I don't see any reason why you would need a permit if you're following all the
And that's
rules.
part of the critical mass ethos, is when you ride in the street, you follow the traffic rules. Stop
Right,
at
if
red lights?
someone-
You stop at red lights?
Well, if the person doesn't stop at a red light, then they should get a ticket. If they stop at the red light, I mean, if they stop at the red light, then they shouldn't be arrested for biking without a permit. The cars don't give the police in advance the route where they're going, and that's basically what we're doing. We're just biking down the street. And,
Let's take a phone call. And it is Stefan in Harlem. Hi, Stefan, you're on the air.
Yes, hello, and you sisters are right on the money. I've been fortunate to ride a bike along with my children and my grandchildren. My little grandson will be 3 years old, and I'm buying him a bike for his birthday this week. And I've ridden bikes in the British West Indies, in Canada, Europe, and in Africa. And I love biking. And I agree with you that at least we're not polluting the air. We just had a report that the air pollution in New York is horrible. It just came out yesterday, I believe.
So do you have a question for our guests?
Yes, my question is this. What can we do about it up here in Harlem? Most of us, we're not very wealthy, but we are very generous, and we support you sisters. But what can we do about police harassment? And do you have a phone number or website that we can join you, and then maybe we can put a stop to all this foolishness? I'll hang up and listen to your response.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to leave you with my signature. I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for your call. Judy?
Well, first off, to find out more about Time's Up, you can go to times-up.org. That's the dash, not spelled dash, so times-up.org. And I would like to say that the best thing that you're doing is you're riding your bike, Stefan, is because the more people ride, the safer it is for other bicyclists. And it makes it so that the more people ride, the more the motorists will be aware of cyclists. So I would encourage everyone to ride their bike.
And that's, if there's a, you know, very simply stated political point, that's it, isn't it? That the streets should be as accommodating to two-wheel vehicles as they are to four-wheel vehicles. And bikes shouldn't have to be shunted aside and not have decent space on the road alongside with the cars. They should just be accepted as vehicles on the road, and that's why you get out there and kind of make this show of force. Is that a fair statement?
Right, that's a very fair statement.
Yeah, that's the joy of, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say also that it's not just the critical mass ride every day of the week. You know, we both commute, and we deal with what you're talking about is bike lanes that aren't enforced, and that's why we come out one night, once a month, to make people aware of what's happening every day to cyclists.
By the way, I've never seen two siblings so nice to each other, so it's very refreshing. One of the tactics in last Friday night's ride was to evade police by taking bicycles on the subway from Union Square, where they gathered. So let's look at some of that footage again.
We're at Union Square Park. The critical mass just all went down the subway, and it's really fascinating because the police are here and they don't know what to do. They're all like, should we get coffee? Should we go to Starbucks? All the domestic spying. All the domestic spying cops. Albano's on the phone. He's like, where are they? Where are they? He's like, well, they're in the subway, and they can't talk because they're in between the subway. And everybody got out and helped them and swiped all the people who couldn't pay for it through. Who knows where the bike ride's going? It's going to pop up somewhere where the police aren't, hopefully, and they'll start riding their bikes. Yeah. Critical mass New York City.
Subway out there.
They use their bicycles, they use mass transit, and they don't pollute.
So the bike riders went various ways on the subway, pretty well lost the police, and met back up further downtown. Here they are on Canal Street.
Oh, we're going to run in circles.
All right, this is awesome. Cops are circling, just looking for anyone with a bike. Our taxpayers' money. Killing right of assembly. Oh, they try to kill it, but it's immortal because it precedes the Constitution. Hello.
1 month when the
So I found them, Canal Street. Happy times.
So you were there Friday night, Barbara?
Yes, I was very fortunate to go on that ride.
This was a purposeful plan to evade the police by getting on the subway and going hither and thither and meeting it back up?
No, not at all. What happened was we were just all gathered at Union Square, and someone had an idea, and we spontaneously spread the word, and within 15 minutes we were all heading down the subway, and we just quietly mentioned that we were going to meet at Fulton Street downtown, and that's what happened.
And there you were.
This is how unpurposeful it was that several people got off at Fulton Street, Brooklyn.
Oh, right, we did lose. We lost about 20 people.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Brooklyn because, you know, I did a call-in on the aforementioned radio show this morning on WNYC just for critical mass riders. I don't know if you were listening, but I invited anybody who was, you know, a critical mass rider at any time to call in and talk about what it was about. But some of the calls we got were from people who used to ride in the Manhattan group and changed to the Brooklyn group because they actually found the Manhattan group too political and too charged and too confrontational with the police, and found that it was much more joyful in Brooklyn, where it's still much more mellow and not quite as, you know, politically and ideologically charged. What would you say to people like that? We had a few of those.
Well, I would say, first off, I would say that the Manhattan critical mass, the riders haven't changed. It is the police response to the critical mass that has changed. The difference between Brooklyn and Manhattan critical mass, if you go on the Brooklyn critical mass, is that the police facilitate the ride, they encourage the ride, they ride along, and, you know, if they decide they want people to just keep riding and not stop at lights, the police will stop the cars and let the riders go through.
If that's true, why do you think that is? I mean, it's all the NYPD under the same command.
It was like since 2004, right? Before 2004. The police, this was most of the time in Manhattan, the way that the ride would go as well.
Right. Basically, it would be the same thing where the police and the cyclists would cooperate together. They would kind of work together. I mean, the NYPD wasn't running the ride, or they weren't saying where to go, but they would just, we would talk to each other.
People in front, just like everybody else was.
And they would decide on the flow what would be the fastest way to get through the city. And for 10 years, you know, most of the time it worked.
But somebody said to us, you know, the cops are getting in people's faces. Some of the riders are putting their video cameras right up in the cops' faces to be belligerent, but within the letter of the law. I mean, do you deny that that goes on?
I think that, well, just one example of the video people, they're just videoing to let people know what's going on so that we could get back to where we were before 2004. when we were riding, people didn't even know about the critical mass because it was, you know, it wasn't something that was a problem.
Much, wasn't a news story.
And it wasn't a news story because, you know, we just rode.
But it was growing significantly every year.
It did grow.
Yes, unfortunately, it takes confrontation to become a news story for most of the media. So that's why people started hearing more about you in 2004, right? Doug on Staten Island, you're on the air. Hello, Doug.
Hello, Brian. How are you?
All right.
I'm awfully glad that there's an outlet like yours that you guys cover these kinds of things.
Thanks a lot.
You know, it's a good segue into what I was going to mention. They were just talking recently now about what happened in 2004. I'm an educator, Brian, and I remember there was a survey about a year and a half ago of 100,000 graduating kids from urban, rural, poor, middle-class districts, etc. And I think only 30 of 100,000 graduating seniors agreed with the statement that it shouldn't be proper for a news outlet to publish a story without getting the government's approval first. And I'm wondering if we're getting more into this kind of police state where everybody seems to be thinking that this whole thing about what happened in 2001 gives carte blanche to our military and community structures to somehow subjugate us into a kind of malaise.
So come on back to the bike riders.
All right. Well, the bike riders, I'm wondering why this happened in 2004. I was part of the people out there during the demonstration.
At the Republican convention?
Yeah, exactly, where we had contrary opinions going on, but we were protesting peacefully and then getting instructions from police about what to do and what not to do, then following the instructions and getting arrested. The same thing happens with these bike riders. I've seen it so many times. And the whole idea that somehow that this freedom and, you know, that we have in this country is somehow a legacy and we don't have to worry about it, I think is frightening when you see these aspects going on constantly in our society.
Doug, I'm going to get a response. Thank you for your call. And as you may recall, we showed video on this show, in fact, on our debut program 2 years ago, of the cops telling RNC protesters how to gather, how to start walking, and then starting to arrest them en masse. But Judy, do you think that applies to critical mass? Are the police sometimes telling you what you can do and then arresting you or somehow harassing you for doing it? Or is that not that exactly that in that way, like he indicates?
It did happen in a critical mass a few years ago, but I don't know if I could speak to it. I know that they did tell some bikers to go to 23rd Street, and then when they did, they arrested them. But I don't know enough details about that. But I mean, the whole idea of the police state and the police feeling like they have to have a presence for when people are being peaceful and just gathering is something that definitely concerns and affects bicyclists and critical mass.
Although one of the other criticisms of Manhattan critical mass that I've heard from someone is that they really kind of were into it until the Republican convention, and the fact that critical mass rode at that time and seemed to interweave an anti-Republican message with the usual message of, you know, make the streets safe for bike riders, kind of turned some people off. Do you think critical mass changed its message or diluted its message that time?
The Republicans came to New York the last Friday of the month.
Which is when you ride.
Yeah, I mean, it was, it's spontaneous, so it just happened that because so many people came, that's what the feeling was like that month. But if people come back, it's not about, it's not a, I mean, well, it's different things to different people, but for me, it's not a protest. It's about biking. And I think one thing he brings up about that people should be, all people should be concerned about is that the cost involved in to taxpayers every month for the police presence. I mean, I was arrested twice on the critical mass ride, and I went to court for 24 times in total, and that costs the cost for the night, the cost for judicial, and we've estimated that it's up to the millions.
What were you charged with?
First time I had about 10, I started with 10 offenses, not riding in the bike lane, not having a light,
parading
without a permit. That was 2 years ago. They were both times they were dismissed after 2 years of dealing with it. And I'm just one person. There's been over, I don't know, maybe 600 arrests since 2004. So We're talking a lot of money.
If they ticketed you for not riding in the bike lane, I'd like to see cars start to be ticketed for riding in the bike lane.
Right, that would be very
But I guess that's
nice.
another show.
Okay.
Thank you both very much for
thank
coming
you.
in. We
Okay,
really
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up in a minute, one of the producers of Hometown Baghdad and more clips from his online documentary series about 3 college guys living in a war zone. We'll also talk to an Iraqi blogger now living in New York. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
Hi, I'm Matthew Goldstein, the Chancellor of the City University of New York. Look who's teaching at CUNY. Michio Kaku, string field theorist and international authority on theoretical physics. John Corleano, Academy Award and Pulitzer Prize winner in music. David Nassau, winner, Bancroft Prize for Best Biography. Jill Barganetti, Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers. Gregory Rabassa, recipient the National Medal of Arts in 2006 from President Bush. Elizabeth Nunez, winner, American Book Award. Godfrey Gums, American Physical Society Fellow and member, New York Academy of Sciences. World-class talent, award-winning scholars, CUNY is their classroom, CUNY is your university.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30, and this show is available now as a podcast. You can sign up for free. It's a free download at CUNY.TV. Earlier tonight in our online video picks, we sampled from the online documentary series Hometown Baghdad about students at Baghdad University. Now we'll view some more clips from the Hometown Baghdad series and talk about going to college in a war zone and the state of the war in general as Congress and the President continue their showdown today over surge or withdrawal. With me now are one of the producers of Hometown Baghdad, Michael Dibenedetto, and Iraqi blogger Zeyad Hosseini, now a college student here in New York, getting a master's in journalism at the CUNY Graduate Center. And let's take a look at a little bit of the video from the blog Hometown Baghdad. This is an introduction to one of the 3 main characters in the ongoing video blog.
My name is Saif. I'm 22 years old. I live in Baghdad and I was born in Baghdad. I am a Muslim, I am Arabic, but I consider myself, I am a secular indeed. I am a student in the last year of the dental college, the University of Baghdad. I'm focusing on my study and I am really concerning about being a good dentist. After I graduate, I'm planning to leave Iraq and go abroad. And I intend to study further and making higher certificates. Nobody wants to live here if he feels that he can live abroad. So the government noticed that, so they decided something very, 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 very stupid. They decided that we will not give certificates for doctors and dentists who are newly graduated unless they serve 3 years in Iraq. I just graduated from dentistry and they want me to serve here 3 years. I can bet on myself 2 days to live. Then I will leave this country now.
So tell me, how did you make contact with him? Tell us a little more about his story and your relationship to him.
Sure. We met him via the Iraqi producers. This show was produced with a team of very professional, incredible producers in Iraq who we met through a producer in Jordan, actually in Dubai, sorry. And so these producers, when we wanted to do this project to tell stories of young Iraqis, they put out their casting net to find interesting people who, would have interesting stories to tell, who would be willing to open up to our cameras and share their stories. And so they found Saif, and we thought that he was really interesting. He's a pretty funny guy. He he flaunts tradition at times, and his story of becoming a dentist and not being able to get his certificates was a provocative one. And so that's how we decided to follow him.
And Zeyad, forgive me for giving your last name incorrectly when I introduced you. It is actually Kasim. But tell us about your impressions seeing this. How recently did you come here from Baghdad, and the scene and the feeling behind that clip of Saif, how reminiscent is that of anything you've gone through?
It almost puts me home, because hometown Baghdad, and that's the whole point, because I can feel most of the scenes in these videos I'm already familiar with, and the desolate streets, the symphony of bullets. There was always in the background there was always the sound of bullets and explosions and American choppers flying above us. So it's very, very familiar with me.
And we'll see some more of that in some more of the clips. In fact, let's look at one right now. Often lost in the discussion of troop numbers and benchmarks and deadlines is a discussion of how Iraqis themselves feel about American troops being in the picture. One of the more recent clips from hometown Baghdad tackles this question.
I believe American government, American administration wants to spread democracy in all over the world.
Believe me, there's nothing here in Iraq called democracy.
No one tells me that. I can see that in my country.
I see clowns every day talking about some constitution, and there is nothing on the ground. It's only the media.
You not just occupy a country that has been 30 years of war after war and just have an election and everything will go right. It's not like that.
George Bush on TV saying that he's spreading freedom and peace in the region. I mean, how could he just lie like that? How could he be the president of the United States? I don't think we will ever understand.
I understand that it's not an easy situation to solve, but so many mistakes have been done, and it seems to me like no one cares.
Some people ask, do you feel liberated?
If I'm liberated, I would do and say whatever I want, right?
How could you even ask me this?
And I'm afraid to say anything.
The Americans call themselves liberators, and we call them occupiers. They are not liberators at all.
I mean, where's their liberation? Where's the liberation?
So, Michael, they take a very anti-American, or at least anti-occupation tone in this clip. Is that the attitude of all three of your subjects throughout?
I mean, they have different opinions. They express a variety of opinions. Our purpose from the beginning was to capture daily life, capture the things that Zeyad was talking about, the symphony of bullets and what they go through on a daily basis. And so, they're not always talking about politics. A lot of people who are following the series wanted from the minute that we started, they were like, what do they think about Bush? And, they think about Bush, but they also think about a lot of other things. And so, the times they express their political opinions, they're often like what you just heard.
How long have you known these guys now?
Well, my relationship mostly is with the producers, because in addition to the Saif, Osama, and Adil holding the cameras filming themselves, there's also a crew of highly trained professionals shooting them as well. And so I mostly know them. But we've been working on the project for about a year and a half now.
About a year and a half. So I'm just curious if in that time their attitudes toward the United States have changed. Have they become more negative than they were, or have you seen any kind of evolution?
I think that that they certainly grew a little bit more despondent about the whole situation, more frustrated with the Americans, but also more frustrated with the Iraqi government. I think that they're unfortunately losing a lot of hope for any kind of resolution that happens anytime soon, and they see a lot of people doing a lot of things wrong.
Zeyad, I know it's hard to make generalizations about any nationality of people, but do you think that that attitude reflects basically what people in Baghdad and people around Iraq think now about the United States?
I think it does reflect what a large portion of the population feels. And I also think it's a mistake to equate being anti-occupation with anti-Americanism, because if you look at these young guys, I mean, they watch Western movies, they listen to Western music, they play guitars, they play heavy metal, and I wouldn't really call them anti-American, because it's obvious that they're not. And being anti-occupation is because for what their lives have been turned into. You can see that their lives are very disturbed. You can see that I mean, when they go out on the street and they see bodies on the street, and they're subject to American raids, and sometimes there are these cultural misunderstandings, and I think it creates a great deal of negativity.
So let's look at another video from the website Hometown Baghdad. We first showed this in our video picks segment about a half hour ago. This is a jarring look at daily life and the realities of living in the middle of a war zone. Imagine having to plan your day around something like this.
I was going to meet my friends in college and to prepare for the exams, but I couldn't get out today, and I think the reason is, well, why don't you just hear for yourself?
So just better lay down and listen to the symphony of bullets.
That was a bullet. I think a sniper shot. Now we recognize the bullets. If it was AK bullets or a sniper, or we can say if it's an American bullet or an Iraqi bullet.
So Zeyad, these are college students. These are middle-class people, at very least people headed for the middle class. Saif, as we saw in the earlier clip, is headed for dentistry. We'll see a little more of him in a minute. But he said he wants to leave the country. Are we seeing now a brain drain? Are we seeing an exodus of those who have the means to leave? And is that a long-term challenge for Iraq after the war?
Definitely. I think that the middle class and the professional class has almost entirely left the country. And the few remaining people who are still there, they're trying to do whatever they can to get out. They're trying to find refuge mostly in neighboring countries, but even then, even when they get to neighboring countries, they try to go elsewhere because they have these residency regulations, and you can't really overstay in Jordan and Syria, and that's where most Iraqis go, the first stop.
Michael, talk about the production of that. There was a lot of first-person reminiscence or monologue there. You cut it together with scenes of warplanes flying overhead. You cut it together with a Bach cello suite. Talk about putting something like that together.
Sure. Well, all the shooting for the series was done by the Iraqi crew in Baghdad, as well as the cast members in Baghdad. And so they shot an enormous amount of footage and then shipped it to us in New York. And so going through this footage and talking to the Iraqi producers every day about, the stories that we see emerging, certain stories would just come together, and there was this, at least for that clip, there was this preoccupation almost with guns and bullets, and it becomes part of the atmosphere, and so we wanted to pay special note to that. And the Symphony of Bullets, the cello suite, is it's kind of funny, it's kind of disturbing. Adele has this great I always say that wrong. Adil has this great way of summing up situations and using really creative use of language. And so that was just kind of us paying tribute to that one particular thing.
And we'll see more in a few minutes from the Symphony of Bullets entry in Hometown Baghdad. But Zeyad, I'm curious to get your take on something that's in the news today, even as it relates to that clip. And that is this debate in Congress now, or between Congress and the President, over going forward with war funding, possibly around the idea of benchmarks for the Iraqi government. So if the Iraqi government succeeds in disarming some of the Shiite militias after a certain date, then the U.S. troops will stay. If they succeed in coming to a political agreement about revenue sharing from the oil, by a certain date, American troops will stay. I mean, they haven't formulated this thing yet, but it looks like this is where Congress and the President might be headed as some kind of compromise war funding measure. Have you been following that, and do you think something like that could be effective at changing the course of internal Iraqi politics?
Yeah, I think it's a great strategy instead of just military solutions. I mean, if anything, the last 4 years have proved that military solutions never work. And if you have just one example, Fallujah, which was almost destroyed, a city destroyed in order to save it, but there's still violence going on. American soldiers are still being killed in Fallujah. And it's the same thing, except that Baghdad is much more complicated, and you have different groups, and you have different militias, and they're all vying for control. And so, yeah, I think it's almost impossible to get a solution just from the surge of troops.
Just from the surge of troops. But making those benchmarks into kind of an ultimatum sort of assumes that the Iraqi government wants the United States troops to remain. Because, you know, I remember when the troop surge was first announced, the Maliki government's official position was that they didn't want it, right? So, you know, the Shiite militias' positions, presumably, are that they would like the United States to leave, because then, since they have the predominant population and most of the weapons, I guess, they would have much more power. So does the Iraqi government really have motivation under a benchmarks ultimatum system to do any of those things, or would they rather wait out the Americans, have them leave, and then go about their business?
I think there are different motivations in play, and different groups inside the political process in Iraq. Some of them want the Americans to stay and fight the insurgency for them. Others, even inside the Sunni insurgency, are now siding with Americans against al-Qaeda, and they want the Americans to stay because they also fear the unknown. They fear the future. They think that if once the U.S. leaves, that the Shiite militias might just take over the country. So I think different groups have a different...
What do you think about that? Because this is what we hear most frequently, even more from John McCain than from the President, that if there is a withdrawal on the timetable that the Democratic Congress had set out, then we're going to see a genocide on a scale that makes Bosnia look light. And the genocide would be Shiite on Sunni, on the Sunni minority. Do you think that's a reasonable prediction?
I think it's already much worse than a genocide. It's much worse than Bosnia already. I mean, people still can't agree if it's 50,000 Iraqi civilians dead or 1 million Iraqi civilians dead. There are no real numbers, but if you look at the scenes of what's going on, I think it's pretty credible.
But the implication of what McCain says is that basically the only thing holding the Shiite majority back from basically ethnic cleansing the Sunnis out of wherever they want them to leave or killing them en masse is the American presence. How much do you think that's accurate?
I think it's already going on a smaller scale, maybe, but you can see that the American presence at the same time is fueling much of the violence. So some people in Iraq, I mean, their view is that they're just sick of it and they just want the Americans to leave, and maybe then the Iraqis can fight it out, and maybe a year or two the different groups will come to an agreement. But as long as the Americans are there, and as long as they're siding with one group over the other, or with the government over the insurgency, or sometimes with the insurgency against the government, it's just creating more problems. It's fueling more violence.
You mentioned al-Qaeda. There's a news story today that the head of al-Qaeda in Iraq may have been killed, perhaps by a rival Sunni group. Al-Qaeda is more or less a Sunni group. Do you have reason to believe this or disbelieve it?
Well, I wouldn't really count on the official Iraqi statement because they've kind of said that in the past and it turned out to be false. But I wouldn't be surprised if Sunni tribes managed to hunt down the so-called emir of Al-Qaeda and kill him, because there's a large movement in western Iraq by the tribes, and they're recruiting tribesmen into the police and to the army, and they're just sick of the tactics of Al-Qaeda.
When we usually hear about the Middle East dividing more into Shiite and Sunni these days, we hear that Al-Qaeda is a Sunni group and is roughly aligned with the Sunni insurgents in Iraq. Why would a Sunni faction have reason to want to kill the head of Al-Qaeda in Iraq? Do you know?
Well, the reason is because they're not a mainstream Sunni movement, and they're much more radical, they're much more extremist, they're very brutal, and they target even their own allies. I mean, there were major fights in the Anbar Governorate between Al-Qaeda and other more moderate, if we could say, insurgent groups or secular insurgent groups. And even in my own neighborhood in Baghdad, there's a kind of confrontation between Al-Qaeda and Salafi, more fundamental elements, and the old Ba'athi and secular insurgents.
I've also heard that Al-Qaeda attacks both Shiites and Sunnis.
Al-Qaeda attacks everyone.
Yes, because their ultimate goal is to stir up trouble and keep the war going to make the Americans look like they're defeated, make the Americans withdraw and be defeated. Do you think that's an accurate analysis?
Well, what I see that Al-Qaeda is focusing much more on killing civilians right now than targeting the Americans. And that's why many groups turned against Al-Qaeda, because they think that they're not really targeting the occupation, they're just targeting regular civilians in Baghdad. I mean, they kill people for wearing shorts, they kill people for shaving their beards, they kill butchers for slaughtering sheep and cattle on certain occasions, and these kind of small things, and that's why the population has turned against them.
Yeah. In this next clip, we have some more from the Symphony of Bullets segment from hometown Baghdad. In the chaos that is every day in Iraq, even students have to be ready to defend themselves. Let's watch.
That sound goes all night long. A lot of times they try to escape and hide in houses.
People wear masks, they break the door and they wake them up, and they handcuff all the family, they rob everything.
I'm ready for anything. I got this this gun, actually. It's a pistol, and I'm hoping to defend, my family, myself. If anything had to happen, I hope I would not have to deal with anything like that. But if anything should happen, I'm prepared for it.
It's so scary. It's so sad. You want to talk about that clip?
Yeah, sure. That clip is still hard to watch, and I've seen it approximately 1,000 times. It's terrifying to see people that are my age, that could be my peers, that are my peers, having to arm themselves like that. One thing that really stuck in my mind was Fadi, who is the producer of the series in Baghdad, once told me that standing on the street corner in Baghdad with a camera was more dangerous than standing there with a gun. And so that's just so devastating that artistic expression has, students have to be like that. They can't be students, be young.
What's the web address, by the way, for people who want to view Hometown Baghdad?
Thank you for asking. It is www.hometownbaghdad.com. And there viewers can watch the videos and they can leave comments. It's a blog, and we just post the videos. And often the cast members and other Iraqi viewers and friends of the cast will post comments answering some questions. So there's a pretty vibrant dialogue going on.
Hometownbaghdad.com. American media has the tendency to focus on how closed off Islamic society can be, and we hear a lot about the roles women play in a religious society. Well, let's get another taste of the Hometown Baghdad web video series, this time with a lighter take on being a young man in Baghdad.
Honestly, no, I don't. I don't have a girlfriend. Mainly because I'm too shy.
When I was a teenager, of course I used to date, and I have many girls in my life.
Majority
of young people are dating. But still, it's hard for anyone to get a date in Baghdad.
Well, it's not easy like the American people. I mean, there it's so normal to have a girlfriend. Here in Iraq, it's not really normal.
It's not cool when you're on a date and explosions happen. So you worry about the way to get to your destination and the way to go back. You spend all of these worries about that. You kind of miss out on the joy of the date.
No, we don't have nightclubs.
Before the war, there was nightclubs, family nightclubs, but now they only open at the morning. Like, as I told you before, I went out with a girl, but it wasn't like a date, you know. It was inside the college, and that's, you know, gentleman do not kiss and tell, you know.
You know, premarital sex. American choppers make such a noise.
We have about 15 seconds left for each of you. Zeyad, you were saying during that clip, you won't see that on the news very much. It's an important thing to see a side like that of life in Baghdad for young Iraqis.
I think it's very important. It's vital, I would say. And I think that the role of news organizations, mainstream media, they should link to this stuff. They should distribute it instead of thinking in the old ways.
And how come all of your three subjects are men? What is this, ESPN?
Hoping you wouldn't ask that. No, we started the project with two female participants, and they both dropped out. One for security reasons, one left Baghdad for the time being.
10 seconds. Is it getting viewed in Iraq, or is this mostly for Western audience?
It was intended for Western audience. It has a small following in Iraq, but the small following in Iraq is mostly their friends.
I think this is a great contribution to media about the war. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you so much.
And Zeyad, thank you very much for coming on again. And that's it for tonight's show. We are here live Wednesday nights at 7:30, and we're available as a podcast. You can sign up at CUNY.TV. And don't forget my daily radio show on WNYC, New York Public Radio, weekday mornings at 10. Tomorrow morning, we'll meet New York's first Haitian City Councilman, Matthew Eugene, just elected in central Brooklyn. That's at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning on WNYC 93.9 FM and 820 AM. Have a great night.